Michigan, Penn State in the big house. This one is big for a number of reasons on a number of fronts. We got Justin Rowe on the line from Blue by 90. Catch his podcast every Monday and Friday, and also blueby90.com. If you go there, you'll catch everything you need on Michigan football. Justin, how you doing today?
Doing well. It's rainy here in Ann Arbor, but supposed to be clear, hopefully for this weekend. So, I want to see I don't want to see a rain game for this top 10 matchup. I want to see, what happens when two beasts in the Big Ten line up against each other.
Yeah, the rain games, the snow games are fun to watch. They're spectacles on TV to a certain extent, but when two of the best teams in the conference are getting together, you want the athletes to be able to perform at their best. Absolutely. This one's a big one on the field. Everybody's going to be focused about what's going on the field at noon Eastern time, but some of that may or may impact what's going to be decided for years to come concerning these two schools. So for Michigan in particular, a ton of recruits on campus over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean they're going to have 20 some guys that are on visits this weekend. A lot of 4-stars that are coming in, a couple different 5-stars. DJ Pickett out there. Jaden Davis, I believe, is coming, but not quite confirmed yet. Isaac Wilson is another 24 quarterback that Michigan is looking at. I think, in the world of recruiting quarterbacks, you cannot put your eggs into one basket at this point because, there's just so much competition for those 4 and 5 stars now. But yeah, I think, it goes beyond the field for this weekend for Michigan. It is, it's NIL. It is the atmosphere at the big house. It's, what's Jim Harbaugh doing? It's this coaching staff. It's how are you utilizing J.J. McCarthy in that quarterback position? So obviously you want to win the football game first and foremost to, keep your chances alive at the Big Ten title and the college football playoff. But I think having a big recruiting weekend for the Maze Out that's going on in the big house, it should be a fun experience for these guys that are coming in.
Justin, Jim Harbaugh at his weekly press conference called it a big game. I think he threw about 3 bigs in there. He called it a showdown, all those things. Because if you look at the Big Ten, and I'm the college football nerd that enjoyed Purdue and Maryland last Saturday. It was a great game, went down to the wire, 2-point conversion. But, let's be honest, this is what the Big Ten is. Unless there's a miracle upset the first Saturday of December, the Western Division is not going to win the Big Ten. Right. So rule them out. It'll be a fun race. They'll all beat each other up. They'll probably all go 5-4 in the conference, or probably 4-5 because they'll lose to all the teams anyway.
Right.
It's going to be a melee over there, fun to watch, but it's probably not going to produce a champion. Maryland's improved, but they've pretty much proven they're not quite ready for that jump. Michigan State's dropped off. We got 3 games. We got Ohio State, Penn State, we got Michigan, Penn State, and we got the game at the end of the year. We got 3 games to decide the conference pretty much. So this is the first one of those 3. So it's pretty huge.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, that is what the Big Ten has come down to. And we all kind of knew it when they switched to these divisions, from the legends and leaders. But, early in the year, we thought Minnesota, wow, they look like a, maybe top 15 team, top 10 team. And then they go out and lose. And so Big Ten West being Big Ten West is pretty much what it is. But, ultimately for Michigan, what this means is you've had a pretty easy go of it up until this point. Obviously you went on the road to Kinnick Stadium. You went on the road to Memorial Stadium in Bloomington and beat some very mediocre teams. Let's just call it what it is. And so now in your first real test, it's an absolute must win if you want to win the Big Ten. So I wonder how the coaching staff is responding to that type of pressure and just weirdness, because last year you look back at it and, Michigan had some tests before they went to Penn State on the road, and they, the Big Ten was just a lot more evenly spread out, I thought. And they were tested pretty well throughout the season, whereas we're halfway through the year and you don't really still know is this Michigan team really, really good, or are they just good? And so I'm excited to see, and I'm excited to see what Penn State brings to the table as well, because you have Drew Singleton, who is a stud at running back, the freshman. Sean Clifford is 28 years old, I think, at quarterback, and obviously has a ton of experience. And so I'm excited to see what this Michigan defense can do with an offense that has looked pretty solid, because really the only offense that Michigan has been, had to go up against is Maryland, and they struggled at times, but I thought they ended up with a pretty good outing against Maryland. So here's one more test for them.
If we look at recruiting rankings, if we look at the way the units have been developed on both sides of this matchup, Penn State and Michigan are pretty comparable rosters. So from a personnel standpoint, the talent looks to be pretty comparable. At the same time, they're just a more proven unit. They went out and did it last year. They've played a little bit better competition this year, especially inside the Big Ten to date, even though Penn State went on the road to Purdue. That might be the better single game win. But over the last few weeks, Michigan's played a couple teams that were decent, where Penn State has not. So do you think there are any significant advantages on the Michigan side? Do you think there are any spots where you feel real confident they can take advantage of Penn State?
I think the one spot is, and everyone wants to talk about JJ McCarthy, but I think that's the spot, is utilizing JJ's arm and going, deep on Penn State's secondary, because Michigan, I'm not sure if Roman Wilson will be back this week. He was out last week for concussion protocol. He's been, Michigan's really go-to guy, him and Ronnie Bell. But Michigan is still so deep at that wide receiver position, and Penn State's secondary has been a little bit suspect this year. Their front seven is very good, but there have been times where their secondary has been torn apart, and so that's where I see Michigan going at it. We've seen a really good balance from Michigan's offense so far. Of you establish the run, like we all know Jim Harbaugh wants to do, but with JJ McCarthy and what he can do with his arm, they've opened it up a little bit, but they still don't go, Ohio State, CJ Stroud trying to throw for 500 yards, right? They still go back to that run game. And I thought it's been a pretty good balance so far. So I would expect, though, that in this game, if it's dry, I expect them to go to the air a little bit more than they have in the past. And I expect them to take some deep shots, because really, 3 weeks ago, JJ McCarthy was missing some of those deep shots. It was, in the first couple games, it was missing it by a few feet. Then it was a few inches. And then it was like, all right, when's he going to hit one? But they didn't take those shots at Indiana. And so I expect them to do that. The stats are coming out about JJ McCarthy in play action and on the run. I mean, Mark, I know CJ Stroud is really good. I don't know if there's somebody better that moves on the move to the right and throws the ball better than JJ McCarthy right now.
And then we got Blake Corum, who, because of Hassan Haskins' presence last year being the main guy, was like a nice feature player in space. Let's get him in space. Let's get him his 15 carries. Let's throw some swing passes to him and show what he can do. But now he's become like a man. Like, give him the ball over and over and over and let him beat on the defense. And it seems like he's physically developed himself as well to be a battering ram. In addition to being the guy that makes people miss in space, he's more of a complete back, it seems, now.
He actually told me, it was funny enough, he said the first couple games when he really only played like a quarter and a half, he said he felt worse then than after he felt after 30 carries or 29 carries. He said, I love getting the ball that much, and I want to do it every single time. Because I said to him, I was like, it's got to be good to have Donovan back now that you can give some of the load to him and take a break. He's like, no, I want the ball. Which you got to love as a Michigan fan, right? That's just your workhorse running back. But, I'll be honest, Mark, last year I wasn't sure if Blake Corum could be that workhorse guy. Hassan Haskins has the body for that, right? Blake Corum's a little bit smaller. He's, I mean, strong as an ox, right? He's like a circle, a square. I don't know what shape he is. He's so big, but he's smaller, you know. So I wasn't sure that he could actually do that with 30 carries, but he had zero problem, you know, in the past few games of doing that. And I know he loves it. And so I don't know if you saw the screenshot of him versus Indiana where there's 5 guys around him and he somehow, you know, whoop, takes it and breaks it. And he didn't end up scoring. They marked him down at the 1, but you know, he really can do it at all levels. He can pound the rock in between the tackles. And then when you do get him in space, it's one little step and he's gone. So that's where I, you know, I think JJ McCarthy said it actually in his press conference this week. When this offense is running on all cylinders, like, I don't know what defenses are going to stop them, but you know, I'm not sure they've gotten to quite all cylinders yet. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they can put it all together this weekend.
Yeah, Justin, Michigan's late wake-up call against Indiana forced me to watch more of the game than I was going to anyway. Michigan, even though it was the big noon game, we know how TV networks make decisions, not necessarily selecting the best game, but the best TV rating team, of course. So I had my eyes on all sorts of other games because there were some really great matchups at noon, but I kept seeing 10-10, 10-10, 10-10. We got into the second half, and I'm like, oh, I got to see this now. Yep. I got to see, you know, if we've got an upset on our hands, or at least see Michigan get pushed and how they're going to break away. So I did see the second half of the game and then caught the Blake Corum run on the highlights. Absolutely. Justin Rose here, Blue by 90. So Blue by 90 podcast uploads every Monday and Friday. Also blueby90.com. So you can go straight there and you'll see it right here on the banner as well. You mentioned Penn State struggles in the secondary. I think the number that I remember seeing was 262 yards average passing through the air by opponents. For some reason, I still believe in the Penn State secondary. Joey Porter is one of the best defensive backs in the conference. Jair Brown, they're really good there from a talent standpoint. I don't know what kind of issues they're having, but what I'm getting at is this is one of those kind of games where if you say, what are the keys to the game? For me, like, well, obviously the offensive lines versus the defensive lines, the secondary, you could go anywhere for keys to the games, but I really want to see, because I like to see athletes in space, of course, any football fan does. I want to see the Michigan receivers against Penn State secondary. I want to see the Penn State receivers against the Michigan secondary, because again, you've got 2 of the top 3 units in the conference in all those areas going up against each other.
Yeah, and by the way, I think I said Drew Singleton earlier. It's Nicholas Singleton. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, you know, I agree with you. I am excited to see. I'm excited to see how Michigan's secondary turns out, because I mean, they haven't gone against any type of prolific passing offense at all. You know, Spencer Petras is Spencer Petras, and that Iowa offense is not throwing the ball by any means on you. And Indiana is nowhere near what they were doing last year with you know, Michael Penix or the past few years, right? So I'll be interested to see what Rod Moore can do out there. He had an interception last week. That was great. Him and Mike Sainristil have been awesome back there. But, you know, Penn State has a couple studs there. You know, Parker Washington has been the go-to guy, but, you know, Brendan Strange at tight end, you know, that is what Penn State loves to do. You know, over the history going back to Joe Paterno, he loves getting the ball to his tight end. So, you know, I think that's something that even Iowa, the only offense that they had going was getting the ball to their tight end. So this is the first test, like, and I swear to God, I've said this is the first test for Michigan, I think, you know, 40 times already this season, but and they keep, you know, somewhat passing it, but I think it'll be interesting to see how that Michigan secondary goes up against the Penn State wide receiving core. And I think, you know, to be honest, I think this is a time where not only do we see what Michigan is, but we find out what Penn State is, because I don't know about you, Mark. I can't figure Penn State out. The 17-7 game against Northwestern, all right, it's a rain game. But they turned the ball over 4 times against Northwestern. And then, they beat Purdue, which was a good win, but let up a ton of points to Purdue, who hasn't turned out to be quite as good even in the West as we thought. And then, after all that, then they're also go down to Auburn and beat the crap out of Auburn and the SEC, who is, not the best SEC team, but they're still an SEC team. That's no joke. So I don't know about you, but I cannot figure out this Penn State team.
Yeah, for sure. And you've got 2 programs and 2 coaches that have not fared well against top 10 opponents on the road. Obviously, Michigan doesn't need to worry about that. They took care of some of those issues last year. And also, of course, they're at home. So James Franklin, much like Jim Harbaugh, has a few monkeys on his back to throw off in regards to his record on the road against top opponents not being the best. So that's another check mark in Michigan's column in regards to if you're sizing up the pros and cons of the Michigan outcome here. I think they've got more on their side. So I think the smart money goes the Michigan way. I just think that there's too many proven aspects to what Michigan's doing versus what Penn State's doing, even though I think the athleticism's comparable. The one thing I will say, when you bring up Michigan being tested through the air, Maryland's got a few dudes, and Talia can sling it around, and they held up pretty well in that matchup. So that's a good sign.
Well, and you know what, too? I think everybody was pretty hesitant on Michigan's pass rush, right? We're going to beat this horse to death of losing Aiden and Ajabo last year. But, Ayabi Oki has done phenomenal. Mike Morris has done phenomenal. Mason Graham in the middle has done unbelievable as a freshman. Then they get I think it was 8 sacks against Indiana. And a lot of those did come in the second half when I think Indiana was hurting at the tackle position. They had some tackles out or go out for at least some series. But, statistically, Michigan's already, close to surpassing the sack total for the total of the defensive line from last year. So they're definitely on pace to be better as a whole. But, I think that was the one thing that everyone was worried about. So can they do it against an elite offensive line is what the question is. And can they do it with just the front 4? Mark, I think you and I have talked about this before. The only reason why Michigan beat Ohio State last year was because Hutchinson and Ajabo got to CJ Stroud without them having to send linebackers. And that's the key to this defense still going. And so, if they can continue getting pressure on the quarterback, that is where this defense, is at its best.
And one more thing about the Michigan run game, when you make the comment, we know they're good, the total team, are they really, really good, like playoff good? One good indication or strong indication in Michigan's favor is when Blake Corum can go out and the Michigan ground attack as a whole and put up the kind of yards consistently against Iowa. So Iowa, they gave up 9 points last week against Illinois. For as awful as they are on one side of the ball, they're still a near elite defense. So it's one thing for Michigan to beat up on a bunch of teams and run for 250 yards against a bunch of teams on the schedule, but Iowa they don't move, they don't get moved on the ground, and Michigan was able to do that pretty consistently. So I think that's another check mark, like, okay, that's another indicator that they're really good at running the football.
Yeah, and honestly, the key for me with that, obviously Blake Corum is Blake Corum, but this offensive line needs to be healthy. And so they're missing Trevor Keegan for first few games, and that was, I thought that it got him into a little bit of disarray. Unfortunately, Trente Jones went out in that Indiana game. His leg got caught. I haven't heard an update on that, but it did not look good at all. My guess would be I'm not expecting him to play. Now, Carson Barnhart's going to step in, and he actually has some really good experience as well. So, we'll see how that goes. But, when this offensive line is healthy, it's still just as good as they were last year when they won the Joe Moore Award. So, I think that, if I had to guess, they're probably going to be in that conversation for the Joe Moore Award again, because Michigan's going to keep running the ball. And if Blake Corum still leads the country in rushing yardage, or I think he's in the top 2 or 3, I believe, right now. Illinois' running back is doing really well, obviously, too. But that's where I think it starts and stops with Michigan, is this offensive line. And if they are healthy and working really well together, then A, they get the running game going. B, you protect JJ McCarthy, who is, everything you need and more. But I think then, on top of that, then JJ does those extra little things as well, where, he can step outside the pocket and run. And that's where I think this offense, it's obviously like, it's simple, but it can be so complex at the same time.
And one last note, JJ is the guy with the lack of experience to a certain extent in comparison to Sean Clifford. So you would think that the experience means less mistakes. Sean Clifford's got a track record of making mistakes. JJ, for the time that he started, he's been risk averse and pretty much stayed away from turning the ball over.
And, I think the biggest key that I saw last week was he did turn the ball over once through an interception. It was a bad pass, but it was tipped, and so it wasn't as bad as it may seem. But the key was, after that interception, he didn't throw an incompletion for the rest of the game. Threw 2 touchdowns and went, and obviously the defense shut out Indiana the second half, but Michigan went and scored 3 times and sealed it for them. So that's where I thought it was the most important for JJ, because we still haven't seen JJ like really get into adversity on the field, but that was the most that we've seen. And I was always wondering, is he truly mature enough in the head to come back after he makes a bad decision and, not force something different or do something like that. Because I know JJ, and he wants to, like, when he makes a mistake, he wants to get it all back on one play, right? But he stayed composed. He, was within himself and led the team to multiple scores after that interception. I thought that was so important, especially when you're on the road. Not like Memorial Stadium is a tough place to play. I think it was half Michigan fans anyway, but I just love the way that JJ has matured, just even in the 5 weeks that he's been the starter.
Justin Rowe, blueby90.com. You see it right there on the banner. Spell it out, blueby90.com. Get right there and check out Justin's work. You can follow him on Twitter as well. And Justin, appreciate you stopping by. Should be a heck of a game, and we will see you soon.
Absolutely. Let me plug one more thing here too. So Wolverine Plus is what I'm working with now. So it's Michigan's NIL content platform that we just came out with at Valiant. We've got Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards on tonight. Chris Howard just confirmed with me. Karan Higdon just confirmed with me that he's going to join, and it's going to be hosted by Devin Gardner. So head over to Wolverine.plus and you can subscribe there for just $7 a month and get a ton of really good content.
Did you hear all those names, folks? Wolverine.plus for $7 a month. There you go. Wow. Good stuff. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.